welcome or welcome back. If you are on BookTok or on BookTube or even book subreddits, there is some books you just cannot get away from, which I usually try to ignore them, but then the hype gets to me and then I break down and buy the book and it's just a vicious cycle. But I'm skeptical. I feel like BookTok is not to be blindly trusted. BookTok hypes up a lot of books and some of them make me side-eye them a little bit. Haunting Adeline, for example. But I am here to read and find out if some of the most viral, hyped up books on BookTok are actually worth the hype or not, and thus finding out if BookTok is to be trusted. Recently, there are 3 main books that I just cannot get away from no matter how much I try, and those books are Heartless Hunter by Kristin Ciccarelli. This is a young adult fantasy romance book. Then in Quicksilver by Callie Hart, this is like the fantasy romance book of the moment. And lastly, Gild by Raven Kennedy. This is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series, which is a dark fantasy romance series that is a King Midas retelling. And I have seen a ton of hype about this series, both good and bad. So we're going to read the first book in this series. All 3 of these books are fantasy romance, which I feel like on BookTok, I mostly see romance and fantasy romance recommendations. And so that is what we're sticking to today, which personally I've been in my fantasy romance era, so I am totally fine with that. We're going to start with Heartless Hunter because honestly, this seems the least daunting. It's young adult and it's like 400 pages, which means it should be a pretty quick read and I should be able to get it done in the next couple of days. All I know about this book is the female main character is a witch and then the male main character is a witch hunter, so should be a good enemies to lovers story. So I'm gonna start reading on this and I will give you guys an update in the next day or 2, and don't worry, this video will have 0 spoilers and I will talk to you guys in a second. Okay, I'm only 43 pages in, but there was this scene that made me giggle because the male main character, Gideon, says that the female main character has elegant clavicles. And that reminded me of The Serpent and the Wings of Night, where the female main character describes a certain body part of the male main character as being elegant, and that is all I could think of. Like, The Serpent and the Wings of Night has ruined any body part being called elegant ever again for me. If you know, you know, but that is all I could think of when I read that. But I'm gonna get back to reading and I will update you guys once I actually have an actual update. I want to give a little update because I am now 200 pages in, which is halfway through, and I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not like overly invested into the story, but I am having a good time. I will say the vibes are immaculate. It gives very fall vibes because the weather is very rainy and just like cloudy and stormy. So this feels like a very good October book. This book did end up being very like high stakes very early on, which I was not expecting because usually in the first book of a new series, it takes a while to get going. But like 100 pages in, the stakes started picking up and I was like, ooh, I need to know what happens next. I am curious to see where the story goes and what ends up happening at the end of the book. I'm not like overly connected with the story or the characters, but I'm having a good time. This is a good, easy read. I'll probably end up reading a little bit more of this tonight, but not too much because I do want to watch the new Salem's Lot movie that came out on HBO Max, or I guess it's called Max now. I don't know. They keep changing the name. But I saw the trailer for the Salem's Lot movie on YouTube and it looks really good, and so I'm excited to watch that. So we probably won't get too much further into this, but we should definitely be able to finish it tomorrow, and then I will give you guys my final thoughts and then we will go on to our next book. I officially finished Heartless Hunter last night. I'm going to say right off the bat, I'd probably give this like 3.75 to 4 stars. I really enjoyed this and I would recommend it, but it's not a new favorite. This book had fantastic vibes. Like, this is a very good fall winter fantasy romance book because the weather in this was very rainy and stormy and it just felt very cozy. However, I didn't like totally connect connect with the characters. Maybe it's because this book is pretty short, like 400 pages for YA is not long at all. So maybe I just didn't have time to really care about them, but I did enjoy the overall plot and I do love anything witchy. A lot of people cried at the end of this book because a very heartbreaking thing happens. I didn't cry, but take that with a grain of salt because I don't cry easily from books. The only book I've ever cried from so far is Morningstar by Pierce Brown. And I don't think I cried also because, again, I wasn't totally connected to everything in this book. And so when that really sad thing happened, I was like, oh yeah, that's sad, but like, oh, we'll move on. This is a very good enemies to lovers book though. I feel like a lot of enemies to lovers, they're supposed to hate each other, but really they just needed to talk to each other and they're like, oh, I actually like him. But in this, like, they really are enemies. And there is a second book coming out, I believe, in February of 2025. And so I will be picking that up because I'm curious to see where the story goes. And I'm hoping that I'll connect with the characters a little bit more in book 2, since we will have more time with them. And also because this book just has good vibes. So I will read the second book for the vibes alone. Do really recommend this book. I think it's a fun time, easy read, great if you are in a reading slump and you're like, I just need something that I can get through quick. This went super quick. I read it in 2 or 3 sittings. So that's very fast for me. So good fall witchy vibes, but I don't think it's going to change your life. Last night after I finished Heartless Hunter, I wasn't totally tired yet, so I was like, you know what? Let's start Quicksilver. So last night I ended up starting Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I'm only 55 pages in, but I'm actually really enjoying the setup and the writing so far. In a lot of reviews, I've seen a lot of hate on the dialogue in this book. Maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm literally not even 10% of the way through this book, but I haven't really seen that yet. So I am having a good time. I think the story is getting set up well, and I am excited to continue reading this book and just having a good time. So we will see how I feel about this in a little bit. I'll probably give you a midway update, like 300 pages in, which will probably be in a couple of days. So I will talk to you guys then. I'm on page 174, and someone tell me why this girl is so turned on by this guy's sweat. We're in this scene and he's like super duper sweaty, like I just took a shower sweaty, and it's making me sick. Sweat is like one of my #1 most hated things. Like if I can physically see like drips of sweat, I will start gagging. So this scene is just making me nauseous. It's like I can smell him and it's so intoxicating, and I'm just like, this is not for me. I finally finished Quicksilver. This honestly took me a while to finish. Usually I can finish fantasy romance books pretty quick, but this took me like a week to finish, which is a long time for a fantasy romance book. But let me start with what I did like. I really enjoyed pretty much all of the characters. It is not often that I like majority of characters in a book. Usually I just like a handful and then the rest don't really care about, but I liked pretty much everyone in this book. Archer is my favorite character. If you know, you know. And I felt like this book was a good mix of romance and spice and plot. So it was nice to get both ends when sometimes you don't want too much plot and sometimes you don't want too much romance. So it was nice to get like an equal amount of both throughout this book. Now, for things I did not like, the plot was boring overall, in my opinion. I am a plot-heavy fan, and even this dragged on a little bit too much for me. The female main character had to do a bunch of experiments, and I could not care less about reading those scenes. Every time I got to an experiment, I had to put down the book. I understood the overall importance of them to the plot and the story, but I just found them so boring. With that being said, I did really enjoy the last like 75 to 100 pages. I found that part of the plot very exciting, and I think it wrapped up the book nicely, and it made up for the parts that dragged on a little bit too much for me earlier in the book. Also, a lot of reviews made it sound like the male main character is morally gray. He's not morally gray at all. He's moody for good reason and is like a cinnamon roll in hiding. He's not morally gray. If you want a true morally gray character, read Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Roerich. That series has morally gray characters. This just has a moody guy that is secretly like the sweetest person. So this book was not bad by any means at all, but I do think it got a little bit overhyped, so maybe that set my expectations too high. Like the first 400 to 500 pages, it felt like this book didn't totally know what it wanted to be. Like it had so many different ideas and it was so all over the place. Like it felt like 5 books smashed into one. If you took the Final Empire, the Serpent and the Wings of Night, Reign of Shadows and Endings, and the Howlers from Red Rising and combined them with slightly worse writing and storytelling, I feel like it would be this book. So my final rating for this book is 3 stars. I'm kind of right down the middle, like did not love it, did not hate it. I can understand why someone would love this, but I just thought it was a little bit all over the place and didn't have a totally clear story, so it threw me off. However, I did really love the characters in this book and the last 100 pages of the story was really good. So for that reason, it is 3 stars. I feel like this is one of those books you need to read yourself to see if you will like it or not, because I can see why someone would really love this and I can also see why someone would hate this. And then there's people like me that's right down the middle. So take what you will from my opinions, but I think it's worth a try. It's enjoyable enough. I was entertained at least. Now we are moving on to our final read, which is Gild by Raven Kennedy, which is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series. I honestly have not heard great things about the first book. I hear the second and third book are a lot better than the first one. So I'm hoping I just somewhat like this first book, and regardless of how I feel about this first book, I will end up reading at least the second book in this series before I decide if I want to continue with this series or not, because I do want to give it a fair shot, and since I've heard the second book is way better than the first, I want to make sure I give it a fair chance. But for this video, we will just be reading the first one. It is under 400 pages and the pages are not very long, so this should definitely go a lot more quickly than Quicksilver, so I will update you guys in a little bit. Sorry, but so far this book is hot garbage. I'm 150 pages in and I do not like this so far. First of all, the story starts off by the king basically having like an orgy with a bunch of his royal saddles, and then our female main character just has to like watch it from her cage. So our main character is stuck in this golden cage in the king's palace, and she's like, it's fine, like I'm safe here. The king saved me and protects me, and so I'm totally fine living in this cage. Which, first of all, the cage in my brain looks so dumb because it's so big she can walk like room to room, so it sounds ridiculous. And I like to think I have like a good imagination when it comes to like picturing scenes in books, but I cannot picture this character at all. So this character is all gold, and she says that she has these ribbons like down the sides of her spine. I think she said she has like 24, and it seems like she has some control over them, but then she mentions that she just lets them hang limp like down her back, and I cannot stop imagining these ribbons as spaghetti noodles. So I'm just imagining this gold girl with a bunch of spaghetti noodles stuck to her back, and it's just not the best image for a character in a book. And in the first 150 pages, she goes like back and forth between being like, I should be grateful to the king for keeping me here and like keeping me safe, but at the same time she's like, I can never leave this cage, like I've been stuck here so long, like a cage is still a cage, blah blah blah. But other than that, not much has happened. Most of the characters suck. Obviously the king sucks, and then the female main character, I'm hoping she has like more growth throughout the end of this book and in the later books, because right now I do feel bad for her, but also she is not very likable. But I'm gonna keep reading. I'm hoping the last like 250 pages are a little bit better. I will say this book is a very fast read. The pages are pretty short, and I'm a slow reader, so if I'm saying it goes quickly, then it definitely goes quickly. So regardless of how I feel about this book, at least it won't take me very long to read it. So I will update you guys when I am done. This book was bad. I did not enjoy it. With that being said, I will be continuing on this series. I will probably end up reading the entire series. For how quickly this book went, I will say not much happened. Once she got out of the cage, it did get better because obviously we can't spend the entire series in a cage. So once she left it, it did pick up a little bit more and I did enjoy it slightly more. Based on how this book ended, I have a good feeling about the second book. The last like 30 pages of this book I did really enjoy, and I can see how book 2 is going to greatly improve from this book. So I am holding out hope for this series. For whatever reason, I am so inclined to read this entire series. I can't explain it. Even though I really did not like this book, I still want to read the entire series. I give this book 2 stars. Again, it was not good. I do not recommend, but you have to read this book to get to the later books. So if you're gonna read this series, just like push through the first one and hopefully the second one is better. I'm talking about this series like I've read more than the first book and I have not, but I have a feeling the second one is going to be a lot better. So I'm holding out hope, and this is a really quick read regardless. So I didn't feel like I wasted my time reading this. And so honestly, I'm not mad about it, even though I didn't like it. I'm gonna be honest, I had higher hopes for this video. We started off pretty strong with Heartless Hunter and then it just slowly went downhill from there. We barely had a 4-star book in this video, let alone 5 stars. So are BookTok books worth the hype? I'm gonna have to say no. I think a lot of books are overhyped and the hype probably sets your expectations a little too high, and then of course, if your expectations are overly high, you're going to be a little bit disappointed, as I was in this video. I think all of the books in this video are worth the read because they're all enjoyable enough, but I don't think they're worth the amount of hype that they get on BookTok, if that makes sense. And obviously this is just my opinion. I think all these books are worth the read so that you can decide whether you like it or not. I know there are good BookTok books out there, like The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I think that book was worth the hype, but I think a lot of books are overhyped and then other books do not get the love they deserve. But let me know if you have read any of these books and your thoughts on them. And please, if you know any BookTok books that are actually worth the hype, let me know so that I can read them, because I feel like I need to redeem BookTok after these books. And if you made it this far, leave a rose emoji down in the comments below so I know who you are, because a rose feels very fantasy romance to me. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video and for making it this far. I appreciate you so much. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next one. I love you. Bye.